don't know whether to thank them or not. The themes that inform both my private work and my public work are largely very similar. I'm basically interested in the ideas of location and how we often figure out who we are, where we are, and what things are by using outside frames of reference, coordinates, if you will. And I'm especially interested in how our understanding of self or place changes as these coordinates invariably drift, evolve, disappear, and reappear. My largest body of work uses manually collaged accumulations of hundreds or thousands of individual photographs to try and explore the personality of a place in a way that a single photograph cannot. These images are shot from a consistent location, but at different times and in different conditions, and try to present a true, unchanged physical space, and also its history, and the many different ways of perceiving it. I embarked on this project to try and talk about complex spaces in a complex way, while still using a relatively reductive medium that is photography. The individual works try to talk about how a place's reality is informed by its past and its present, and the many ways in which it may be understood. By giving the viewer more than one frame of reference, these images try to allow for a broader range of understanding of the subject, with multiple ways in and out of the work, and hopefully a different kind of experience each time it is revisited. This collection of work, and I definitely see it as a collective project, and ultimately a book, is intended to be a kind of photo essay or a journalistic piece about a society and a world that is complex and chaotic, and which eludes description by conventional single-frame photography. Another series of work, this time in pencil, examines the traditional way of mapping groups of states as they exist physically, side by side, with neighbour bordering neighbour. If we depict them thrown down one on top of the other, like this map of the European Union, we get a more interesting description of how states exist and interact nowadays. Today, our closest relationships are not necessarily with those who reside beside us. Our policies, customs, economies, and borders intersect and intertwine, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes violently. Recent years have shown us that the traditional ideas of territorial integrity are permeable, to say the least, and if you really think about the dynamics of international relationships, you invariably come up with a big mess like this. This is a book, this is a book of travel photographs, and the reason I'm showing you this work is that it's the first time I used grid coordinates. And I use them here as image titles to try and communicate the idea of changing locations without saddling the images with any preconceived notions of meaning or of place. So for me, the best kind of public art is engaging. They should invite participation between the work and the viewer, or between viewers. It should generate awareness, opinion, and discussion as part of a greater public forum, and it must offer us new ways of looking at our public spaces, our societies, or at things in general. My first public work is premised on the idea of latitude and longitude. As we all know, the globe is crisscrossed by these lines that occur in smaller and smaller increments of degrees, minutes, and seconds. And while we are used to seeing degrees of latitude many hundreds of miles apart on a classroom chart or on a road atlas, the smallest increment, 1 second, is only about 100 feet. And this distance, I think, this is a distance I think everyone understands in a different and more intimate and more immediate way. So what we have here is a one-to-one scale map. It's conceptual work that uses a series of these lines to invite people to think differently about the space that they inhabit. As the signage explains, the intersections on the map can locate you very minutely, very precisely, but the lines also connect you to other spaces around the globe. The description of the work on the site was left deliberately vague, so that it would work more as a question than as an explanation. Because the lines themselves are understood in much the same way across different cultures and societies, I thought it would be interesting to restage the work in different contexts to see if the responses to it were different in each place. For example, the first iteration of this work was in Windsor, Ontario, and this location is interesting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we have the juxtaposition of a natural border, in this case the Detroit River, with an artificial line exactly like the one that constitutes most of the official border between the US and Canada. Secondly, Windsor and Detroit are two cities that straddle this very visible border, and yet are highly interconnected culturally and economically. They also have strong ties with the rest of the world through the auto industry. Given the challenges from foreign competition and the more recent global economic crisis, I hope that responses to the map would yield a very interesting and unique set of interpretations. Vancouver, where the second iteration of the map was staged, is interesting for a different set of reasons. Firstly, it has a significant population who either hail from or have strong ties to places overseas. So pre-existing notions of interconnection and interrelationship already exist here. We also have the same contrast of the natural versus the contrived. As you see here, Stanley Park's natural coastline is set in contrast with the man-made grid. In this instance, the map also raises questions of history and politics. These lines were devised by and were instrumental in bringing European colonizers to these shores. And here they are, etched upon the land, which has essentially been appropriated from its original inhabitants. So, really this project can be looked on from a conceptual point of view through the lens of culture and history, or from a political standpoint. It's quite a versatile work whose specific meaning is always the same, but which may be interpreted in lots of different ways. And hopefully in the future I will be able to stage it in some other interesting contexts. And very briefly, this is an application mock-up for another project that hasn't yet been realized. It's a set of coin-operated binoculars placed on a city street, and it works on the expectation that when you look into one of these devices, what you see is the actual scene in front of you. What we're trying to do is use this expectation to trick the viewer into thinking what they see is real. What you get, in fact, is the real view, but in the form of a stereoscopic conversion of an historical photo, taken from exactly the same angle, and which is sufficiently similar to the present-day view that the viewers momentarily think that they are looking at the real thing. As the true nature of the image becomes clear, it is hoped that the initial visceral understanding of the scene as being in the here and now will make this encounter with the past seem somehow more immediate and concrete. This work was devised in collaboration with art historian and curator Kimberly Phillips, and as such we can look at it in two ways. As a standalone work that creates an opportunity to connect directly with the past in a real and surprising way, and as a unique tool with which to tell stories about the history of a particular place.
Thank you, Ross. That was extraordinary, very provocative work to see. Thank you.